We start with America's latest obsession, flying objects in the sky and how to shoot them down. The US really is taking it to the next level. Yesterday, they spotted another UFO, unidentified flying object, UFO, and the Pentagon is not ruling out alien visitors. Yes, you heard it right. Yes, I'm sober. No, this is not the plot of a Hollywood film. Yes, aliens have entered the fray. And it's only Monday. Imagine the possibilities. But back to the news. Last week, we told you about the US shooting down a Chinese balloon. Since then, they've shot down 3 more. And they're not calling them balloons. They're calling them objects. Were these Chinese? American officials have no clue. They say they're working on multiple theories. One of them involves aliens. Let me start from the beginning. Yesterday, American forces downed another object, not a balloon. This one had a fancier description. It was called an unmanned octagonal structure, and it had some strings. It was first detected on Saturday, floating above military sites in Montana. It may ring a bell. This is the same North American state where we saw the Chinese balloon. So on Saturday, America spots an object here. On Sunday, the US Air Force dispatches jets, and the object is shot down over Lake Huron. Why was it shot down? Was it a military threat? The US did not deem it a military threat, but they fired a missile nonetheless to bring it down. Why use a missile against something that is not even a threat? The Pentagon had this to say. This object, they said, was floating at 20,000 feet. Commercial flights operate at that height, so it was necessary to bring it down. Later in the day, a US Air Force general briefed the media. He was pressed for details like what was this object, where did it come from? Someone asked about aliens too, and the general said he does not rule out aliens.
This is for General Van Herk. Because you still haven't been able to tell us what these things are that we are shooting out of the sky, that raises the question, have you ruled out aliens or extraterrestrials, and if so, why?
Thanks for the question, Helene. I'll let the intel community and the counterintelligence community figure that out. I haven't ruled out anything at this point.
You can't make up this stuff. And this is becoming quite a story. American officials are baffled. The sightings are becoming more frequent. It started with the Chinese balloon. That was on the 4th of February. Since then, there have been 3 more objects that have been spotted, one near northern Alaska on the 10th of this month. The second one was over Canada's Yukon. This was near the US-Canada border. American jets shot down this one on the 11th of February. And then we have the operation from yesterday. All 4 objects met the same fate, shot to death. The first one was Chinese. What about the rest? US officials have no answers. They say they're dealing with unidentified aerial phenomena. In simpler words, UFOs, unidentified flying objects. It's a term used for anything mysterious that flies at a high altitude. It's also a concept that Americans seem to love. You may have heard of Area 51. It's a secret US military base right in the middle of a desert in Nevada. It's under surveillance 24/7. Planes are not allowed to fly over this area. No one knows what really goes on there. Reports say this base is used to develop cutting-edge aircraft, but the popular perception is that this is a base for aliens. In fact, Area 51 is at the heart of all alien conspiracies. The most famous claim is that this area hosts alien spacecraft and bodies. None of this is true as far as we know, but America's culture of secrecy around UFOs fuels conspiracies. A few years back, US intelligence released a report. It shared data about UFO sightings. From 2004 to 2021, US officials reported 144 UFO sightings. Then from 2021 to 2022, the numbers almost doubled. 247 sightings were recorded in this period. The same report had some videos too. These are mid-air encounters with what appear to be UFOs.
There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west.
US Navy pilots captured these videos. What were these objects? And where did they come from? The US intelligence still doesn't have answers, even with videos. Last year, American lawmakers had a hearing. They demanded answers, but officials did not have any.
I would simply say that there are a number of events in which we do not have an explanation, and there are a small handful in which there are flight characteristics or signature management that we can't explain with the data that we have.
The same story is playing out today. It's bizarre. The airspace of two major countries was invaded, but the US and Canada still don't know what's going on. And in typical American fashion, whatever they don't understand, they shoot down. Meanwhile, China has an announcement to make. It spotted American balloons, it says. Beijing claims at least 10 American balloons trespassed over Chinese territory. Safe to say we haven't heard the last of this. And if the world is worried about flying objects and balloons from China, wait till you hear this. China wants to triple its nuclear arsenal. Reports say the plan has been cleared by Xi Jinping himself. How many warheads does Beijing want? At least 900 by 2035. China has a stockpile of around 400 warheads today. They're rapidly expanding it. Let me show you some pictures. Experts say China is building 200 new missile silos. They're also building nuclear submarines and air-delivered nuclear weapons. The plan is ambitious and dangerous. Beijing is said to be working on weapons like this one, a nuke to take out satellites in space. Last year, Chinese military scientists conducted a test. They ran a computer experiment, a simulation of a nuclear blast in space. These scientists have created a model. It evaluated the performance of nuclear anti-satellite weapons. What was the outcome of the experiment? A nuclear blast would create a radioactive cloud in space. This cloud would be as big as the state of New York, and it could destroy satellites that orbit near the Earth. The US has been watching China's build-up closely, and this is the American assessment of what's going on. A study published by the US Department of Defense in November last year, it said China could have 1,500 nuclear warheads by 2035. That's more than the previous estimate. China is already firing more missiles than anyone else in the world. In 2021, China's rocket forces launched 135 ballistic missiles. That's more than the rest of the world put together, 135. America says the Chinese buildup is a serious threat. How do you think China responded? Listen to this.
I want to stress that the US pointed fingers at China's normal modernization of its nuclear force, made wild speculations, and blatantly tailored a nuclear deterrence strategy for China in this report. China is seriously concerned and firmly opposed to this. We solemnly tell the US that China has the capability and confidence to safeguard its national security interests, and China won't be intimidated by US nuclear blackmail.
So why is China suddenly chasing nukes? One of the reasons is deterrence. Beijing feels threatened by the West. Perhaps the Communist Party will feel safer with more nukes. Also, the bigger arsenal helps put more pressure on adversaries. This is what experts fear. More nukes will make the PLA, the Chinese military, more confident. It could launch dangerous missions like invading Taiwan. How can China use nukes in a potential battle for Taiwan? Experts call this the nuclear backstop strategy. What is the nuclear backstop strategy? China could point its nukes at two targets. First, the region itself, the areas in and around Taiwan, and second, the US mainland. By threatening to attack these two regions, China could push ahead with an invasion of Taiwan. And this is not a hypothetical situation anymore. Beijing demonstrated its capabilities last year when Nancy Pelosi traveled to Taiwan. That visit was historic. Nancy Pelosi was the highest-ranking US lawmaker to visit Taiwan in 25 years. For China, this tour was a provocation. It retaliated with live-fire drills. 11 missiles were launched at that time. These were the Dongfeng 15 ballistic missiles. They fell into the waters around Taiwan. Some of the missiles also flew over the island. Why was this significant? And what was China trying to prove here? Two things. Number one, China showed it could attack US naval vessels if they approached the waters around the island. And number two, these missiles were nuclear capable. Reports say the Dongfeng 15 can carry a nuclear warhead. And that's not the only weapon that the Chinese used. In the days that followed, China sent bombers around Taiwan like this one. It's called the H-6. And this too can carry nukes. This display of nuclear might is a clear provocation for the US. And here's another one. China is making a fresh outreach to Iran. Beijing has invited Ibrahim Raisi, the president of Iran. He'll travel to China tomorrow. It'll be a 3-day visit. China says President Xi extended a personal invite to the Iranian leader. The agenda, we're told, is elaborate. The two leaders will meet for talks, of course. Also traveling with Raisi are Iranian business leaders, and they will meet their Chinese counterparts. But what explains this outreach, and why now? You see, Iran is in dire straits. International sanctions have crushed the country's economy. There is a series of shortage of essential supplies. Plus, there are anti-government protests. The regime is on the back foot. China senses an opportunity here. Iran's nuclear deal with the West is dead. The negotiations remain stalled. The West is unlikely to go easy with Tehran. Enter China. Not very long ago, China signed a $400 billion investment deal with Iran. Now it is consolidating its hold over Tehran. Tomorrow's visit could set the tone for the future. We'll be tracking it. Japan is facing a population crisis. Their premier issued a dire warning recently. He said the country is on the brink of not being able to maintain social function. And while Japan is looking for solutions, one suggestion has triggered a storm: mass suicide for the old. This is courtesy of a professor at Yale. He said old people in Japan should just kill themselves. His remark has drawn a lot of backlash, but guess what? It has also won him an audience. Apparently, this was done in Japan in the past. But can it even be considered in a modern society? The professor has an explanation for what he said, and critics fear he may end up influencing policy decisions. Here's a report.
Japan has a new wrinkle. Along with its fertility crisis, it faces an aging crisis too. A Yale professor has presented an unorthodox solution. He suggests mass suicide, or seppuku, of the elderly. Seppuku refers to a ritual disembowelment. It can be both obligatory or forced. Samurai did it to themselves until the 19th century in Japan.
If the population is experiencing sort of rapid aging, then unless we do something, then the country and the economy.
The solution sounds a bit harsh. As you can imagine, his remark has sparked outrage. Yusuke Narita is an assistant professor of economics at Yale. He made these remarks on a streaming news program in 2021. At the time, he said, it's the only solution and it's pretty clear. This year, he was asked to defend his views in class. To do so, he showed a clip from the 2019 horror film, Midsommar. In the movie, a cult forces an older member to jump off a cliff. Narita said it's difficult to say if this is a good thing, but if you think it's good, then work hard to create a society like that. But why are we talking about this now? It's because this week, the professor said he was taken out of context. He says he was discussing a growing effort to make room for the youth, though he still says euthanasia could become mandatory in the future. He says this would allow younger generations to come forward, whether in business, politics, or arts, as the older generation refuses to leave. And this surely does not help Japan, especially due to its fertility and aging crisis. It has one of the lowest birth rates in the world. Last year, it saw its population plunge by more than 600,000. It also has one of the highest life expectancies in the world. Last year's data makes the Japanese population the oldest in the world. Those over the age of 65 accounted for about 30% of the total. In 2020, nearly 1 in 1,500 people in Japan were aged 100 or older. Remember, Japan also has the most public debt in the first world. It has a shrinking workforce. Enough young people are not filling the gaps in its stagnating economy. But Japan is not the only country that's facing aging. The world is aging at a rapid rate. This is pushing us into a new era in human history. By 2030, 34 nations will have over 20% of their populations aged over 65. This will include Germany, Italy, Canada, France, and the US. This could also explain why Narita's comments have not just invited backlash, but also won him an audience. He's viral on social media. He even spreads his message through comedy shows and energy drink ads. And he's not alone in sharing such opinions. In 2013, the country's finance minister said something similar. He suggested that old people should hurry up and die. Surveys note that the Japanese public supports voluntary euthanasia. We're told many fear he's rekindling views that have gained traction in Japan. Deference towards older generations is waning. The young are frustrated. They say they're being held back. So the Yale professor's remark may spark more than a social media debate. It could unduly sway public policy. Narita says his prime concern is how a few tycoons continue to dominate industries, and that he only meant that the older generation must be phased out. He has softened his language since. He regrets not being more careful with his words. Regardless, he continues to say that the discussion is coming. He doesn't advocate its introduction, but predicts it will be more broadly discussed.